Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. I'm talking about Saturday night's main event, episode 30 that aired in January 27th of 1992. The show was shot there in Lubbock, Texas. And this was a Saturday night's main event basically to build up WrestleMania 8. This was a big powerhouse show for WWF. I think one of the main reasons why it was kind of a different style of Saturday night's main event. They made sure that all of the main players from WWE were all featured on the show. We had the likes of Hot Rod Roddy Piper. We had Hulk Hogan, Sid Justice, Ric Flair, The Undertaker, Randy Savage, and an aging Jake the Snake Roberts. One of the reasons why was because NBC decided to cut ties with WWF after the April of 1991 Saturday night's main event. The show sat dormant until early 1992 when Vince McMahon was able to sell the show to Fox. It's not really a new show. It's not really a new anything, but you can tell that there's a different style of attitude. It's almost like the Attitude Era kind of cuts. There's a new open. There's a new graphic that goes for Saturday night's main event. They're almost like trying to take it to the next generation. Even though the open is really heavy on Hulk Hogan at the time. It's just different to not see the NBC logo on the entrance when the wrestlers are coming out. It's wrestling. It's not really shot different or anything else like that. But you can really tell that something is different. They're definitely getting close to the doom period of WWF in the early 90s. When you can normally, they're shooting the wrestling in the ring, and you can see the roof of the arena, the last row of fans. You can really tell that they're in a small house that night, and they did their best. I mean, the house was full, the people were packed. It just wasn't that big. WrestleMania 8 is like one of the few WrestleManias I look at where I'm like, every guy on that card honestly kind of really means something to me in my childhood. The thing that I think about, there's no Andre the Giant. There's a few guys you can pick out that aren't on that card. But it's just one of the WrestleManias top to bottom that I can watch. And even if the wrestling's not great, I'm like, that was a good show. Basically at the end of it, this was a good episode of Saturday night's main event. It definitely was jam-packed. The show was cut back to only being an hour long. I don't know if there was a problem with theme musics, and I know at this time a lot of them were done by like Jim Johnson. They were done in-house. They owned them. But the arena music is really piped down. You can kind of hear the themes, but they're almost in the background, like they're not supposed to be playing them, like an ECW show or something like that. So it is kind of weird. You can tell they do some cuts because some of the guys, no matter how big of a star they are, like they're already in the ring. They get the jobber entrance, and I'm talking about a guy like The Undertaker. We're early in his WWF career, but the guy had already been WWF champion. No, wait a minute. This is early 92. He wins it in 92. I apologize. But still, he was a bigger star than getting the jobber entrance, even if Ric Flair was his partner. I'll tell you that almost every match depends to be, it has a meaning on this. The only one that I guess you can say is kind of filler was the third match, Sergeant Slaughter versus Jim Duggan going up against the Beverly Brothers, but it was advertised going into that show, the Legion of Doom were going to defend their tag titles against the Beverly Brothers. That's what they hyped up on, like, Superstars in prime time. And then all of a sudden, this show came on, and they were nowhere to be seen. Within a few weeks, the Legion of Doom, they end up dropping their tag titles on Superstars to Money Inc. And then disappearing. They actually left the WWF in a disagreement. They end up coming back a few months later, shortly after WrestleMania 8. They come back, and their second run, not so good. It's when they bring back Paul Ellering, which you should think would be good. But Ellering is carrying that dummy around that, if you don't remember it, don't look it up. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't really know what they were doing at that time. But, yeah, LOD versus the Beverly Brothers was supposed to be on that show. Probably wouldn't have been that long. Probably would have just been the Doomsday Device. I don't think they had plans for LOD to drop the titles because they would have been a big part of WrestleMania. I don't think they would have had them like on the chase against the Beverly Brothers at WrestleMania. It doesn't really make sense. WrestleMania tag title match ends up being Money Inc. Going up against the Natural Disasters. So I don't know. I've never really heard about what happened. Maybe I have to dig up that Legion of Doom RF video shoot interview and see if I can find the clip where they talk about this time period. Opening match ends up being Roddy Piper and the Mountie. This is, coming off of Roddy Piper beating the Mountie at the Royal Rumble. This was the time period when the Mountie was using the shock stick on people. It's how he got the title off of Bret the Hitman Hart, and then Roddy Piper had to stand up and fight the Mountie. This match seems screwy from the opening of the match. Piper ends up handing the belt to the ref. The ref is trying to show the championship off, saying this match is for the Intercontinental Championship. Jimmy Hart just runs in and grabs the title. In defending the referee and defending his championship, Roddy Piper is kind of fighting with Jimmy Hart back and forth, and then he gets jumped by the Mountie. He fights the Mountie off, and he's jumped by Jimmy Hart. During all this, Piper ends up getting knocked down. Jimmy Hart ends up bringing a solo cup of water, and he throws it on Roddy Piper. Water and electricity. Good conductor. I think that's the right way to say it. And then the Mountie ends up bringing the shock stick into the ring to shock Roddy Piper. He shoots him on the chest, much like if you remember the TNA electrified cage match between, I think it was between LAX and the Dudleys, that piped in shock sound. They got it from here because when the Mountie hits the shock stick, it makes the loud noise over the event speakers, and you hear it piped in like that. Piper ends up jumping right up, almost like a guy on Cops. Who's running from the cops, who's on drugs, who gets shot with the taser. And he attacks the Mountie. He ends up actually using the shock stick on Mountie himself, then covering him up. And then Morella wakes up, and they end up counting the 1, 2, 3 for Piper to get the win. And then he ends up pulling off his shirt, and he's able to show that he's got a rubber flak vest thing on. It has no shock on it, so I guess he was shock proof at the time. We have the build up to WrestleMania's 8 main event press conference, where it was chosen that Hulk Hogan would be going after the championship of Ric Flair. We all know that this changes, but they show the outcome of everybody being affected at the press conference is the Undertaker, Roddy Piper, Gene Okerlund. We have Hulk Hogan, we have Macho Man Randy Savage, and we have Sid Justice. Sid Justice flips out, basically saying that Hulk Hogan will never beat Ric Flair on his best day, but he thinks that he can. And then a few days later, we have Sid Justice apologizing to Hulk Hogan on Superstars. And I guess that's how this match comes to be. Hulk Hogan and his new friend Sid Justice are going to be teaming up against Ric Flair and The Undertaker. When Hulk Hogan comes out, he is coming out with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. My first thoughts was this is like Brutus the Barber Beefcake was hosting the Barbershop, a talk show at the time. He hadn't really been wrestling since 1990 when he had the parasailing accident. Of course, he was supposed to have the match against Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 1990. He ends up getting replaced by Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado. Maybe because it was a surprise and they weren't giving you the match that was built up at the time. They have the Texas Tornado get the win, as we saw in the Iron Claw. But this was like the first time that Brutus had come down to ringside. This is not quite the build up to WrestleMania 9, which would be a year later, where he actually made his return to the ring wearing that Ultimate Warrior style mask, I guess you can say. It's still kind of creepy to this day. And then to the fact that he was able to actually wrestle not wearing the mask like in WCW, once he went there as like the boogeyman, and he had that match with Hogan at Starrcade. So I don't know, maybe that was a mask they actually made for the Ultimate Warrior. They were going to run a gimmick. They decided they had to get their money's worth. Maybe that's why they stuck it on Beefcake. I'm not really sure. But Beefcake ends up coming down to the ring. I was sitting there kind of thinking, like, if he's such a good friend of Hulk Hogan, why isn't Hulk Hogan teaming with Brutus Beefcake in this match? Flair and Undertaker ended up cutting the ring off. Sid Justice is kind of sick of Hulk Hogan and his ways. He's not tagging Sid in, so Sid just flat out turns on him. He's not looking for a tag at any time in this match. At the time you think that he would get the hot tag, come in, clear house against Ric Flair and The Undertaker, he'd be down adjusting his knee pad, or he'd be tying his shoes, or he'd be fighting with the crowd, not even looking. And as Hogan's crawling over, The Undertaker just sneaks up behind him and cuts him off. At one point, when it finally looks like he's going to be able to make the tag and Sid's going to have to come into the match, Sid just jumps down off of the ring post and just walks to the back, just leaves Hogan out there to die. The match ends up getting thrown out by disqualification. I'm trying to remember what was that actually caused the disqualification. But it was, what was it? I don't remember. But as Flair and Undertaker are about to beat up on Hogan 2-on-1, Beefcake slides into the ring. He doesn't get hit or actually hit, the heels. He just kind of like, makes them look the other way. Hogan jumps up. Hogan starts hulking up, and he ends up throwing both guys out of the ring. As Hogan and Beefcake, they're in the ring. They're posing down, and they keep pointing up like, hey, we're going after the big guy. We want some of that Sid Justice, because Beefcake tells them, like, Sid just left you. He just took off, and I guess we'd have to watch like the Superstars or something like that to find out, does Hogan just say, I don't want the belt, I want a piece of Sid? Like, how does WrestleMania get changed? And how does it basically go in a different direction? From there we go to Sergeant Slaughter and Duggan defeating the Beverly Brothers. This basically just ended with them hitting the Beverly Brothers with the Genius Scroll. The match was only 2 minutes, and not really much going on there. And in the main event of the night, we had Randy Savage going up against Jake the Snake Roberts. This was like the best feud of the year of 1991. It was a short one. It happened around the time of Survivor Series, where basically Randy Savage had the Cobra bite Jake the Snake Roberts. They ended up taking Randy Savage. They ended up taking Jake the Snake Roberts out of the Survivor Series because of Sid's injury. And so they ended up making that a 3-on-3 match. Savage wasn't able to be at the show, but then they hyped up the Tuesday in Texas, which just was the main event of it, where basically Savage got his revenge, but this was the end-all be-all match. Savage ended up coming off the rope, getting the pin on Jake the Snake Roberts, and then we had Miss Elizabeth actually run down to the ring, celebrating the victory. As the show is about to be, calling it quits, we see a Jake the Snake Roberts looking at the ring from the actual curtain in the back, like right where Gorilla would be. Him looking into the camera saying basically, this isn't over. And you gotta be wondering as the show's going off, what is he talking about? Are they going to have another match? Is the match that's going to happen at WrestleMania? But we actually find out on Superstars is that as Ms. Elizabeth and Macho Man Randy Savage were going to be walking through the curtain, Jake the Snake Roberts was going to hit him with a chair, but it was actually the Undertaker who prevented the attack. He was holding the chair so Savage couldn't hit him. Savage versus Undertaker ends up being the match at WrestleMania. This ends up, I guess you can say, being the face turn of the Undertaker. No longer wanting to do the dirty deeds. With Jake. Jake ends up getting beat at WrestleMania. He had got a big offer from WCW. To jump ship, but while he was waiting out his non-compete clause, WCW had a change in power, and was it Jim Herd? No, it was Bill Watts. Bill Watts, comes in and he basically looks at Jake's big money contract, and before it's actually signed, the offer was made, but before the contract is signed, he ends up cutting Jake's deal. Jake, because he had just burned Vince, felt like he couldn't go back. He ends up working, I think he ends up working a year, if even that, with WCW. And his career at that time is on the downhill. It is what it is, but Jake would have a run. He had the big match against Sting in WCW. Most people remember him coming back to WWF, but really only to lose the finals of the King of the Ring to Stone Cold Steve Austin. And from then on, there on out, man, it's basically the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, which I think happened in 99, and then just praying that he gets fixed by DDP, and then him going into the Hall of Fame around WrestleMania 30. So this basically was, I think, in my opinion, this was probably Jake the Snake Roberts' last big match. Yeah, maybe the Sting one, which I think happened at a Clash of the Champions, but that's pretty much the exclamation point on his career. This was a great episode of Saturday Night's Main Event. Happened from a great time period of my childhood around WrestleMania 8, so I was pumped to watch this one. This one definitely was 2 thumbs up.